I thought it was funny. So the knives seem to be out for the Happy Time murders from a lot of other critics, which isn't surprising for a high-concept R-rated comedy shunted to the dead end of summer by a studio that clearly doesn't know what to do with it, but the level of the vitriol is surprising, at least to me, considering the target is so unassuming. The Happy Time murders is the very definition of not a critic's movie, granted. It's a vulgar, lowbrow comedy with zero pretense to being anything else, but even if this sense of humor isn't your thing, I can't imagine it being the kind of movie whose very existence is an affront to your sensibilities. I'm given the wonder of some of the issue is that it's a relatively rare case of a genre comedy with a high concept premise that isn't trying to use said concept to transcend being a comedy. Especially now in the golden age of meta-narrative, we tend to expect that any story taking the time and doing the work of setting up an alternate universe to inhabit is going to use it to do some kind of allegory or message or broad social commentary, much in the way that Who Framed Roger Rabbit, yes, which Happy Time Murders bears an unavoidable thematic similarity to, used its bizarre old-time Hollywood alt-history scenario to do both a Chinatown send-up and an allegorical fable about the history of racism, gentrification, and infrastructure politics in old Los Angeles. And there's definitely a place for that. It's often a way to make a great movie, as Roger Rabbit definitely is, but I don't think that means on the other end that a high concept not being used for a higher purpose makes that movie necessarily bad. In any case, the Happy Time Murders is decidedly not going in that direction, i.e. a higher purpose. It's one big conceit of a world where Sesame Street and/or Muppet Show-like puppets are a race of sentient, though oppressed and discriminated against beings living alongside normal humans exists entirely for the purpose of telling one joke over and over. Haha, that character that looks like something from children's television just said or did something naughty. And really, yeah, that's it. That's the joke. That's every joke. Haha, the puppets are swearing. Haha, the puppets are fucking. Haha, the puppets are smoking, drinking, doing drugs, shooting guns, getting shot by guns, and so on. There's some broad gesturing early on in the opening monologue at the idea that human racism doesn't exist in this world because all the humans are equally racist against puppets, but they don't really go anywhere with it. Instead, it's just 90 minutes worth of the movie banking entirely on the idea that innocent-looking things debasing themselves will remain consistently funny, and it doesn't seem to regard making fun of a genre, in this case police mysteries, as an obligation to say something about the genre. So think Naked Gun more than Blazing Saddles in terms of parody versus satire. Fortunately, director Brian Henson, yes, son of Jim, inheritor to the legacy of the same, appears to have created film by dumping his lifetime's worth of gags I wasn't allowed to do with the actual Muppets all into a single feature. So while the result isn't particularly deep, it's often screamingly funny with jokes running minute to minute and, surprisingly, even though it shouldn't be, nonetheless still imbued with the so impressive I keep forgetting to notice how impressive it is puppeteering technical skill that the family name will always be associated with, thankfully. In terms of story, it's a low-key parody of sleazy mid-90s neo-noir movies a la Shane Black and Joe Esterhazy. The low-key in the sense that a lot of the sequences are played more or less completely straight for the genre and only rendered funny by the fact that half the parts are being acted out by puppets. Our hero is a puppet private eye named Phil Phillips, who at one point was a star LAPD rookie whose tragic fall from grace was used to justify continuing to bar all puppets from becoming cops on the basis that they can't be trusted to police each other. When his ex-TV star brother is murdered, Phil suspects that it's tied to suspicious deaths of other cast members from a puppet-centric 90s sitcom about to make a lucrative nostalgia comeback in syndication, a plot turn which suggests that whenever the screenplay was written it hasn't been updated in a while, and Phil must team up with a very bitterly separated ex-partner, a police detective played by Melissa McCarthy, who else, to solve the case. Again, that setup is extremely familiar, and the eventual solutions and scenes leading up to it also being more than a little predictable, feels like much a part of the joke as the standard issue downtown LA setting. If the Happy Time Murders could be said to have a secondary subtle gag underlining the main punchline, it's the equally true observation that scenes you've seen play out 100 times, replayed 101st time, but with puppets without anyone acknowledging the absurdity firsthand, yeah, remains pretty goddamn funny. Whether you'll get more out of it than that, assuming you're inclined to find that kind of thing funny in the first place, which if not, don't bother. In this case, the trailers will tell you exactly whether or not you'll like the movie, will probably depend on where you land on the Venn diagram of being charmed by authentically trashy, low-rent, rough-around-the-edges, aggressively vulgar comedy of the type that ruled screens in the 80s and 90s, and genuinely impressive, deliberately old-school practical effects puppetry. I'm right there, so I had a ball, even while recognizing, yes, there's plenty of room where a different decision could have resulted in a better film, but the potential for better doesn't retroactively make good enough worse. I'm pretty sure that makes sense, right? And while it would be a disservice to spoil any of the best jokes to illustrate the point, and while I'd still hesitate to call the Happy Time murders anything close to profound, I will say it was refreshing to once again see a lowbrow comedy that's able to just be a lowbrow comedy without trying to declare itself a hero just for existing. It feels like ever since we let the South Park guys get away with believing their own hype for like a decade or so, nobody can just make a dick joke anymore without having to then peacock around and throw themselves a fucking parade celebrating the act of dick joke telling as some kind of brave and righteous stand against some nebulously censorious social justice schoolmarm boogeyman, baking that defiant poise into the meta-narrative to the point of overwhelming the actual story, all for the sake of scoring politically incorrect brownie points. And so it is refreshing to see a real deal, cheap and nasty Police Academy squeeze play type thing just go, hey, no, here's a dick joke. Hope you laugh at it, because we're gonna do 20 more of them. The Happy Time Murders is a one-joke movie, and the joke isn't particularly novel, but it's funny as hell, and they tell it pretty damn well. 3 stars, make up your own damn mind.